Sunday school leader. My wife and I are back from the Clemson, South Carolina area. We're back here in Arkansas. It's good to be back in our own bed. It was great to be with the grandchildren, great to be with the daughter and son-in-law, but it's always good to be back home. Hey, we're continuing in our unit entitled Victory. This week we're in session 3. It's entitled Victory Over Sin, out of Romans chapter 6, verses 4 through 14. And the point of the lesson is that sin is no longer my master, Jesus is. As we're in Romans this week, we know that Romans is written by whom? The Apostle Paul. And the Apostle Paul is a brilliant guy. And his theology sometimes is very, very deep. And sometimes he uses words and phrases and repeats those thoughts and changes them around a little bit, and sometimes you read through it and it looks like a big convoluted mess and you're not really sure exactly what he's saying. I think as we read this passage, we know what he's saying, but it really helps me when I have a passage like this is to put it in more of a visual context. And that's what I'm going to try to do to help us all out today. So, as you see here, what I've got up here on the board is the kingdom of death and the kingdom of light and life. Now hopefully you've already read through the scripture passage, and so I'm not going to go into detail about what each verse means or anything like that. So you've read through the passage. Now I'm going to try to explain that in a little visual way. So in the kingdom of death we have sin, and sin is the master. And of course, as the master you have servants, and you have sinners, of course, as those being subservient to the master. Now, we know that what's the end result of sin? It's death, isn't it? We know that the wages of sin is death. We know that James chapter 1 tells us that sin starts in the mind and it ends up, the result is death. So we have that. We have sin as death. Now, over here, we've got the kingdom of light and life. I'm going to abbreviate here, and JC would be for Jesus Christ. And so, Jesus comes along, and he pays these wages. He pays the penalty. He pays the penalty for our sin. He pays that as for his death. His death pays that penalty. Now, I'm try to get my colors here so I don't get too mixed up. This is me, and I'm a sinner, and I am under the master who is sin. I hear about this good news. I hear the good news that Jesus paid that penalty for me, and I can choose, and I think, that's a bunch of hogwash. I don't believe that. There is no Jesus Christ. If there was, he certainly wouldn't come and die for me, because he doesn't know the things I've done over here in this kingdom of sin, kingdom of death. I could choose that, or I could choose to accept his payment. And when I do, then I become over here. I'm a sinner. Well, let's just say this. I'm a saved sinner. We'll use some good old Southern Baptist terminology here. I'm a saved sinner. And so I'm no longer here. I'm over here. A different kingdom. In fact, my citizenship has changed. The book of Philippians tells us that our citizenship is in heaven. It's not on earth. And so my citizenship has changed here. Now, in all this, as I become a Christian, as we say, as I've accepted that gift, my first step of obedience is baptism. And that is it's a symbol. It doesn't save me, but it's a symbol of what Christ has done for me. As I go into the water, as I'm immersed, it's a picture of Christ being dead, dying and being buried. And then as I'm raised up out of the water, that's a picture of the resurrection. And so we see that here. And I like to think of baptism like that wedding ring, right? Anybody can go down to the jewelry store, buy a wedding ring, put it on their finger. That doesn't make them married, right? Anybody can get baptized. That doesn't make them a Christian. The ring is a symbol of what's happened, right? It's a symbol of the vows that have happened. All right, so we've got that. Now, Here's the thing. Here I am. I'm the saved sinner. Death is no longer my master. Sin is no longer my master. However, here's the thing. My relationship is automatic. But whom I report to is not automatic. What does that mean? That means that as a saved sinner, my relationship with Jesus Christ was instantaneous. However, I don't always report to Jesus. I sometimes, oftentimes in my case, revert back and report here. But that sin is no longer my master, yet I go back and report to him time and time again. Pick up my notes here just to help me out so I can see these a little bit better. In fact, even the Apostle Paul, let's see, this is Romans 6. I think it's in the next chapter in Romans 7. He talks about, here I am, I'm over here, I'm saved, yet I sometimes do the things I don't want to do, or I don't do the things I know I should do, and it's sin that's living within me. And he keeps basically saying I'm reporting back to sin, and I shouldn't be doing that. So what's the point of the lesson? Let's remember what that is. It is that sin is no longer my master, but Jesus is. Remember, to whom I belong, my relationship, that's automatic. I belong to Jesus. Nothing can change that. However, to whom I report is not automatic. That's choice. That's will. That's discipline. And so I have to make that choice. Whom am I going to report to? Am I going to report to Jesus, who is my master, or am I going to be a runaway and run back to my old master? And we get a picture of this, don't we, when we think about the children of Israel who were freed from bondage. They were freed from the bondage of Egypt. They were out in the desert just for a little bit, and they said, oh, remember back here? Remember back here how good it was? They didn't have it good. They were beaten. They were forced to work. Their working conditions got worse, but yet when they were freed, they kept looking back and thinking, oh my goodness, it was so much better back here. We do the same thing. We should not do that, should we? We should know that we have a choice. To whom do we report? Do we report to Jesus? Or do we continue to go back and want that sinful life and report back to the old master of sin? That helps me understand the passage a little bit better. I don't know if it'll help you or not. That's all I have for this week. Don't forget to pray for your class. Next week we'll be looking at the victorious faith, and then victory over fear, and then victory shared. So we are halfway through this series on victory at the end of this week. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you next week.